You're all set, Al. You can start, and when you're ready for that stuff to be presented, like I said, either let me know or I'll give somebody from Nightheart the ability to put up a presentation.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to call the meeting of the West Warwick Pension Board into session on October 19th, 2020 at 19:39 hours. Michelle, can you do the roll call? Sorry, Tracy.
Albert Hiru,
Yeah.
Helene Kay,
Here.
Ralph Salmon,
Here.
Michelle Lombardi,
Here.
James Atchison.
Here.
Welcome aboard, James.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be on the board and to participate. Looking forward to working with everyone.
Okay.
Thank you for joining. Okay, item C, review and approval of prior meeting minutes. Yeah,
Hey, Al.
September 21st, 2020.
Al, could we have a prayer first?
Sure. It's not any, but we can do that. Is that going to make a violation? Elaine?
I doubt it, since it's not exactly an agenda. I don't have anything for discussion, so.
Okay. You want to leave that?
I proposed that last month and it was accepted, and we were going to do it tonight.
Yeah. It didn't,
Pledge of allegiance and the prayer.
all right.
I don't
Let's
heard of any violation.
all right. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance first, then. Only
All
problem is
right.
flag. Ralph.
I pledge allegiance. Are you ready?
Yes.
I got the flag in front of me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A moment of silence for members of the active service overseas and on land here, and any of our past departed members and those that are sick and ill at this time.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ralph. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, item C is review and approval of prior meeting minutes from September 21st, 2020.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from September 2020.
I second the motion.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of September 21st, 2020. All in favor?
Hi.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item D is review of Rockland and Clearbrook monthly expenses and portfolio status for previous month. Let's see here. On Clearbrook. That's just an name. Tracy, I don't think you got one. Tracy,
Yes,
did you get a report from Clearbrook?
I believe it's in the packet or a bill. There's something for you in there.
In there, but there's no.
I didn't get the flash drive, but you could just, that's the invoice that came in that they took from Rockland.
Oh, you got, all right.
I'm looking at a performance update information from Clearbrook, but it's not for us.
Yeah, that's
It's something called Menorah Heritage Foundation. It's not ours. belongs to somebody else.
The invoice?
No, not the invoice. I'm talking about the performance update from Clearbrook. I thought that's what we were talking about.
I didn't see that. Let's,
You said review of Rockland and Clearbrook monthly expenses and portfolio status for previous month. So, I was looking at the portfolio status, and it's not, what I received is not for us, it's for somebody called Menorah Heritage Foundation. From
Oh, John
Clearbrook.
Cheshire must have sent the wrong one.
I'm thinking that would be the case. Now, Rockland Trust sent the right information.
yeah, I'm looking at this.
Okay.
I didn't see what you had, but, I'm looking for that.
There are, I don't see any bills. Do I see a bill for Clearbrook? I see only Nyhart in here. I don't see any bills for Clearbrook, just Nyhart.
Oh, I see what you're saying here. It's September 30th. Yeah, they sent it for somebody else.
And
Because I can't read the dollar amounts in that black, but it doesn't look the same. No, it looks
Yeah.
like Clearbrook has sent us the wrong information. Yeah,
I'm sorry, Al, I did find an invoice for Clearbrook. It's after the Rockland
yeah, I got,
Trust pension
yeah, but
update for $33,000.
the report for somebody else, not us. So they sent us the wrong report.
Right.
All right.
But the invoice is for us. It's
Yeah.
invoice number 735. It is for us.
We'll do that when we get to the bills. All right.
Okay.
For Rockland,
Al, we don't pay Clearbrook's bills though. That's just something that you just tell them that we received it because it just comes right out of Rockland.
Right.
right.
We're not going to pay that bill. We don't want it with the bills. You could just read that.
Yeah, I see it. Yep, no problem. But you need to call them, Tracy, and tell them they sent us the wrong report.
Okay.
All right, thank you. On the Rockland Trust, this is for September 1st to September 30th, 2020. We had a beginning market value of $446,578.47. Change in the account value was a negative $44,131.50. Market value on September 30th of $40,563,063.72. Basically it on that. Not much on this one either from them. Any discussion on the Rockland Trust? Hearing no discussion, I'm going to close this one out.
Al,
Yes.
we didn't really discuss Clearbrook's charges. It says for the quarter ending December 30th, 2020. And the charge is $33,687.80. I'd like to make a motion. I would like more detail from Clearbrook as to where, I want a breakdown of these charges. What are they paying to the various funds that we have in our portfolio? And how much of this is actually going to them in accordance with our contract?
All right, it looks like it's a percentage, but, all right. You made the motion. Motion's been made to have Clearbrook.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion made and seconded to have Clearbrook give us an itemized invoice on itemized breakdown on invoice number 735 from 10/14/2020. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. Item E. Hold up 1 second. I would like to skip item E for the moment and go to item F, which would be Nyhart, so that we can have them do their presentation. We don't have to sit through the rest of the meeting. Is that okay with the rest of the board members?
Yep, I agree.
Works for me.
Colleen?
Yeah, that's fine. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay with me. Okay.
Is that okay with you?
It's all right with me.
Yeah, okay with me. Yeah.
Michelle?
Yep, I'm okay.
Okay, we're gonna skip item E momentarily. We're gonna go to item F. F is discussion and action regarding other post-employment benefits and pension for evaluation reports and to discuss mortality table adjustments and assumption rates with Nyhart. Okay, it's all yours.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Al.
You're welcome.
If don't mind, I'll say hello for just a few minutes and then pass it to my colleagues. I've met and spoke with most of you, I think, other than Jim, I believe, if I heard correctly, is new. But my name's Carter Angel, and I've taken on a new position here at Nyhart, and so most of my duties as a actuarial consultant, if you will, are being transferred to some colleagues, if you will. Well, one particular, if you will. I think you know most of the faces on the screen otherwise. But so if you don't mind for a moment, I'll introduce Lawrence Watts. He's been with Nyhart for a couple years now, but has over about 10, 12 years of experience in the field. His primary focus is with public plans, so he's got a wealth of knowledge that is going to be a great addition to your team and is really going to take my place, if you will. And just wanted to introduce him. And then really say hello and pass the torch, as I know Lawrence and Elizabeth and Drew have a lot to talk to you about on the pension side, and Emily and Matt have a lot to speak with you about on the OPEB side. So with that, Al and Aline and Michelle and Ralph and Tracy, I'm still around if you guys ever need anything. Just send me an email, give me a call. Always happy to talk, but I leave you in fully capable hands and look forward to hearing the rest of the discussion tonight. So Elizabeth?
Thanks, Carter. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm using a different format than I might usually because I'm sharing my screen. So sometimes my mic has been spotty on this computer. Thank you for taking the time to this discussion with us and to present some of this information to you before we finalized valuation results for the year here. If it's okay, I can go ahead and share my screen if that's all right. I noticed one person, I think, has to give me permission to do that. Is that right?
That would be Joe. Joe, if you can hear us,
Yep. So let's.
share her screen.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, yes.
Okay. So let me go ahead and,
See if that works for you, Elizabeth.
okay.
And if not, let me know which of the two files you want put up, and I'll put one of them up. There you go.
All right.
Yep,
Everybody can
it's
see it?
working. Yeah,
Great.
you got the pension plan document up right now.
Yes, perfect. Okay, I've had many of these Zoom meetings now over the past 8 months, and so I think I finally got the hang of it. It's good that I got it for a public meeting. So, all right, I'm going to be presenting most of the results today, and Lawrence will provide his expertise and wisdom along the way as we kind of go along here. So, we wanted to meet with you to discuss changes that we are foreseeing. So we have preliminary information ready for you for your valuation. We have not yet finalized our results because at the time that we were discussing these assumption changes, we didn't have all of the data questions back in. So these results are not final as we're going through. However, we don't expect them to change very much based on any kind of responses that we've already gotten back. So we wanted to go ahead and kind of show you where we're sitting here as of 7/1/2020, and then show you what we are recommending to change to going forward. So just to go through some of the preliminary results right away, what we saw for this past year was that the asset return was less than we were expecting.
All right.
The plan experienced a 5% return rather than the 7.5% return. I would say that that is common for this year. As I'm sure you're all aware, 2020 has been insane. We saw a significant dip in the market, and now we're seeing it rebound. Interest rates are very, very low. So I would say this is a return that I would expect to be consistent amongst other 630 plans. One other item that we have ready to go are our estimated liabilities. Again, these are preliminary. However, we did see that our liabilities fell very close to what we were expecting, which is a good thing. And your funded status did increase from last year to this year, which is also what we were expecting. The plan made their recommended contribution, and that had a significant impact in helping you improve your funded status. So today, what we wanted to discuss with you were recommendations that we have for this 2020 valuation. You may recall that we discussed with you last year, there were some new mortality tables that came out that were published by what we call the SOA, the Society of Actuaries. These are mortality tables based on a population specific to public pension plans nationally. So it's a significant study based on hundreds of thousands of lives, and these are lives that work in the public pension sphere. Okay, so it's the population of your pension plan essentially. You are currently using what are called the RP 2014 tables, which are based on a broader population of pensioners, but not specific to public pension employees. So your current tables, while up to date, are not as well suited to your population. We did do a preliminary calculation of what your recommended contribution would be for this year if we didn't change that assumption, and it would be close to $11 million, which is close to what we were projecting last year. If we were to adopt these new mortality tables, your recommended contribution would increase to $11.6 million. And we'll go through a little bit more detail as to how we got there. And we would also like to discuss your assumed interest rate. Now, we do have an experience study that is coming up here that is required to be done every 3 years under the Rhode Island state laws. So there are going to be other assumption changes coming potentially here for the 7/1/2021 valuation. We still think it's prudent, though, to discuss this mortality change specifically this year because there is some increased scrutiny around these tables specifically by auditors. It's becoming a lot more common for public plans to adopt these tables. And if you don't adopt them this year, it's likely that we would recommend that you update these tables with your experience study anyway. So it would be sort of delaying the inevitable. All right, I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. There we go. There was a slight delay in this computer. This page is just reiterating these are preliminary estimated results. This is showing a one-year impact. We do expect, however, that in the future this has an ongoing long-term impact. We provide you with a projection year over year, every single year. Just given timing, we couldn't prepare it prior to this meeting, but this will have a long-term impact on your plan and your ongoing funding for the plan. So we think it will be prudent with the experience study to include some projections of what your plan may look like going forward. And just to remind you, at the 7/1/2019 valuation, what we were projecting was that the town would need to contribute 101.6% of the recommended contribution in order to meet the 60% funded requirement by 2032, which is required under your funding improvement plan for the state of Rhode Island. All right, and we're just going to jump into our preliminary funding results. We've shown your historical funded status as well as your funded status, both under the current assumptions as well as our proposed mortality assumption. So you can see your funded status has improved over the past several years as a result of making the recommended contribution. And there have been years of favorable asset experience and there have been years of unfavorable asset experience. But in general, you are climbing upwards because you are making the contribution at the recommended rate. So we show at 7/1/2020 that we would certify a 26% funded status if we weren't to change any of your assumptions. If we were to update the mortality tables, you would drop to 25% funded, which is still an improvement from the prior year, just not as much. So you can, oh, sorry, does somebody have a question? Okay, I apologize.
Did you
I thought I heard somebody ask something very briefly. All right, for shorthand, I'll just mention the new tables are referred to as Pub 2010. The current tables that are being used for the mortality tables for the valuation are the RP 2014 tables. So what we're seeing with the 2010 tables is that public plan employees are living much longer lives. All right. On this page, we have broken out your recommended contribution into specific pieces. So when we determine your recommended contribution for the pension plan, it's comprised mainly of two major parts. What we call the employer normal cost, which is the cost of benefits that employees are earning in the upcoming year that the employer is paying for. So there's a certain portion that employees already pay for. The leftover amount for the upcoming benefits for the year is paid by the town. And we've also shown the amortization, which is the payoff of unfunded liability. As you saw on the previous page, and I'll just top up, there's a $46 million, there's a significant shortfall between your assets and your liabilities for the plan. And we've shown these contribution recommendations as a percentage of your payroll. So if you look across in the gray line, for this past year, the recommended contribution was 60.9% of recommended payroll. If we weren't to change any of your assumptions, the recommended contribution would still be 60.9% of your payroll, showing that basically what we had expected to happen will happen. And you can see that 54% of payroll is a payoff of your unfunded liability. If we were to update your if we were to update your mortality to the Pub 2010 tables, you can see that the employer normal cost jumps up to 5.4% of total payroll and the amortization up to 56.4% of your payroll. Okay, so that's the breakout as a percentage of your what you can expect for your contribution recommendation for the year.
When do we do that update?
The update of the mortality table?
Yes, ma'am.
We recommend doing that for the 7/1/2020 valuation, the one that we are preparing right now.
Okay.
This will impact the recommended contribution for not this fiscal year, but the upcoming one, fiscal year ending 2022.
Remember we talked about this last year and decided to stay what we had. Talk about maybe we're changing it this year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had discussed it a bit last year, and this year we're seeing some increased scrutiny around it.
Okay.
So that's why we're strongly recommending it this year. And we're also discussing it with several other towns in the state of Rhode Island as well.
Okay.
All right. On this page, we are breaking out exactly how this change is going to work. So with this study, it's quite specific. So it's specific to public plan employees. But with this study, they also broke it out into smaller segments, and they looked at mortality based on a variety of different characteristics. They looked at it by region. These are gender-specific tables. They broke it out by the type of work that an employee does. So when we look at these Pub 2010 mortality tables, these public 2010 mortality tables, there are mortality tables specific to public safety employees, police and fire. There is a mortality table specific to teachers, specific to just general employees, and to disabled public safety and to disabled non-public safety, as well as continuing survivors. So they got very specific with regard to mortality for all of those different groups. As of right now, we really only use 3 basic tables for your plan. We use a blue collar table for the police and fire employees. We use a disabled table for disabled folks, and we use a general table for everybody else. Okay, so this becomes much more specific by group, and it does change to these groups in a different way. So what we're going to show you is the breakout of your recommended contribution by each of these different groups, because there's a different impact for each of them. And we are applying the same improvement scale that we've applied in the past, so there's no real change there. We did update it for 1 year's worth of improvement, but we are showing less mortality improvement, so it's a slight savings there. So that is something that we've done regularly and is only resulting in savings, so we'd assumed you would want to adopt that. And it's the most up-to-date information available.
And Beth, if I could jump in just for a second. In broad terms, what we're seeing is that teachers live the longest, followed by general employees in the public sector, followed by public safety, which is kind of intuitively what you guys would think, right? And I'm sure that Carter and Beth have talked to you about it when they introduced these new tables last year. But it was a little bit surprising to actuaries that public sector employees were living so much longer than their private sector counterparts. But I think it usually boils down to, I think most actuaries think it boils down to the fact that you have better retiree health care, and you have a substantial population that's not hitting the social safety net otherwise, that would otherwise bring down the average. So like Beth said, this is, I think, going to become the standard across the public sector. And if you don't update it this year, we would almost certainly want to do it next year with your experience study. So sorry for interrupting, Beth, but thank you.
No, thank you, Lawrence. So, and Lawrence has a lot of sector experience, I will say. So when he says it, you know it's right. On this page, we are just discussing the estimated results for the valuation at a higher level. So on this page, we're showing that the update to the new Pub 2010 mortality increases your liability of $6.5 million. So that $6.5 million is now an additional amount to be paid off over your amortization period of 25 years as a percentage of your payroll. Okay, so that's increasing your unfunded liability about 5%. The total normal cost, which is, again, the cost of benefits that employees are earning over the upcoming year, increased by 5%. I'll note that really the part that the employees are paying isn't going to increase with it, because it's just a flat percent of the payroll that they contribute. So this is going to just increase the employer side. It's not going to change what the employees are paying in there. And then the amortization goes up 4% as a result of that $6.5 million that the liabilities are increased by. So the recommended contribution is $600,000 higher just for that year. And it's going to be continued, that $600,000 is going to grow each year, right? So you can basically take $600,000 and tack it on to your recommended contribution along with your salary scale each year going forward. So next year, what your contribution would have been about $600,000 times 3.5% higher. All right, a couple other things that we would like you to consider with the PUB 2010 tables. They're specific to your plan, or your type of population, excuse me. They are slightly more recent than the RP 2006 tables, based on slightly more up-to-date information. And there's just a lot more scrutiny around this. Moving to these tables is going to have a similar impact on your GASB reporting, which is the information you report to your auditors, which is why we address this with you now as it's audit time, because it's likely they will be asking you about this if these aren't adopted. It's possible they won't, but we just have seen increased scrutiny around it. And this is the chart that I was alluding to earlier, where we have broken out the impact to each of the different groups of moving to these mortality tables. So for comparison, we've shown the results from last year. So the recommended contribution for fiscal year ending 2021 is shown in the leftmost column. Next to that is the preliminary results if we didn't change anything, then the PUB 2010 results, and then the dollar amount increase, and then the percentage increase as a result of moving to these tables. Okay, so you can see who are the most impacted. As Lawrence was mentioning, school employees were probably the biggest shock of these mortality tables. That's a 7% increase in the recommended contribution. They found that teachers are living an exceptionally long time. Similarly, police and fire also are hopping up a significant amount, 5% and 7%. The reason that that's happening a little bit more to those groups as well is we were using a blue collar table for those groups originally, which is even more quote unquote aggressive. I don't want to use the word aggressive. The blue collar tables basically say that in general, these employees don't live as long as everybody else in the total group. So what these PUB 2010 tables are showing is not only are they outliving the blue collar type employees, but when we compare to a just general mortality table, they're significantly outliving that kind of group as well, which is why you see a significant increase for those two groups in their recommended contribution. And
Emily,
oh yeah.
I have a question. Actually, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First question is, does the 2010 mean that this table actually came out in 2010, or was it just based on a study that was done in 2010 and it came out several years after that?
I'd be happy to answer that
So
question.
PUB 2010 is yeah, go for it, Lawrence.
Sorry, Beth, to interrupt. The 2010 refers to the central year of the data collected to do the study. So it takes the Society of Actuaries a number of years to send out surveys and get data back. And so they have what they call a central year, which is basically the average of the data used. So these tables actually came out, I think January of last year was the official publication date, maybe the year before. So they are relatively new. By comparison, the tables that you're using now, the RP14 or RP06, you'll hear it said both ways. Those are based on data dating back to 2006. So this data is not only public sector specific. It's also 4 years on average newer and more recent than other tables. Sorry to interrupt, Beth. Does that answer your question, Helene?
Yes, it answered my first question. Now, if we were to stay with the Pub 2006 tables, how would that, would you be able to tell us soon how that would impact us actually hitting that 60% funding mark in 2032 that we've been aiming for?
So we haven't run the formal projection yet. I will say that our results were fairly close to what we were anticipating for the year, but there was a slight asset loss. So before we were saying 101.6% of the ARC was needed to be contributed. I would anticipate that it wouldn't climb much higher than that, but it would be slightly higher as a result of the asset loss for the year specifically. That's what I would anticipate without running the cost projection.
Okay.
But I can't say with certainty that that would happen, just having not run that yet. Again, just because the data is preliminary and that's a little bit more involved than
Elizabeth, I seem to remember one of these presentations like this, that you were saying that the ARC is going to increase a lot, and we had saw projections and the numbers going to climb. If we don't adopt a new fatality table and stick with that one, wouldn't that make those numbers climb a bit because we're not keeping up with it? We're going to actually fall behind, so the ARC would contribute more than just a slight bit.
Lawrence, did you hear it?
Yeah, it sounds like Beth's having some issues. Al, to get at your point, yes, but that would take time for actuarial losses to present themselves. So your intuition is exactly right. If you don't update the mortality tables and then the mortality turns out to be more accurate under the Pub 2010 tables and you hadn't adopted it, I hate to use the phrase kicking the can down the road, but that's basically what you'd be doing. You'd be putting in an ARC that was based on an assumption that people are going to die too soon. And so eventually you'll see that those people are living longer than you were assuming, and you would have to make it different. It's, exactly as you were saying. So in the short term, your contribution would be lower, but if that mortality turns out to be accurate, you would have to make it up with higher contributions later. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Because I saw the last proposed for like a 5-year period. I said, I don't see how they're going to come up with the amount of money they're going to do ARC for each year. So to me, that if we had talked about this last year, like I said to Elizabeth earlier, do adopt it, because we talked last year not adopting and saying we're probably do it this year. And if we don't adopt it, it's just going to make it more down the road, and we're going to have a big problem. I think adopting it's going to take some of that liability of increasing the ARC a lot. It's going to drop it down some, so it's not so much a burden on the taxpayers.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, Al.
I was going to ask, is that am I making an assumption that's somewhat right, or am I way off?
I'm going to give you another scenario. Let's say we don't do anything. Now we're paying ARCs. Where our ARC increases about $500,000 every year, give or take. Okay. In 10 years from now, in 2032, our ARC is going to be up about $5 million more than where we are now. Okay.
Okay.
Now, and that's assuming that we just keep we make all of our projections. It'll be about $5 million where we are now. In 2033, that ARC will drop like a rock because we will have met our 60% goal of funding goal. Okay. So we could do nothing right now with these 2010 mortality tables, and in 2033 essentially start fixing the problem. that we created by not doing anything right now.
All right, the only thing I have a question on that is what about where they're finding some groups are living longer than others, longer than what they originally thought. So isn't that liability may increase in the art?
It could be a liability, but remember, it's only over 10 years. See what I mean? This is not, we're creating a problem for 10 years, and then we'll start to fix it. In other words, in 2033, we may be, while we were anticipating not having a very big arc, in 2033, we may have as big an arc as we did in 2032. That's why I want them to run projection tables for us.
All right, going along with the signaling, and let's say we don't adopt, and then this year come along, we don't adopt it again, but things change a lot, and we decide that we need to do that. Wouldn't that be a bigger hit, percentage-wise, compared to what they're showing now?
That will depend.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, sorry, Helene and Elizabeth, it depends on the experience that you have between now and then. The percentage impact will depend ultimately on the new people who come into the plan or those who leave the plan due to death or termination. I would say the magnitude would be similar, but if you keep having losses because your mortality assumption is not correct, then yes, it will compound the effect of your new arc when you do make that change. So I also want to add, since I have the floor, at some point we will, due to our professional standards, we will have to maybe stick our flag in the ground and say, well, we really need to move to this new mortality table. I don't know that we're quite there yet, but if we get 5, 6, 7 years down the road and we continue to see actuarial losses because of mortality, so people aren't dying at the rate that we expected, we're probably going to have to come to you and say, hey, you know, the auditors have been telling us to move to these tables, and we're seeing that in the experience. So that would, I don't want to say it would derail your plan, Helene, but it would make things a little bit more difficult, because here we would be sitting in 2025 or 2026 and still be ways away from emerging from your 60% FIP.
Well, I have to be honest with you. I don't think $1 million increase in next year's budget is going to go over very well with the town council. So, I mean, $500,000 for the ARC and another $500,000 for the mortality tables, that's going to be a stretch.
And we're certainly not, sorry, I apologize that I am now bright purple. Again, I mentioned this computer is not one of my most impressive, but it is the one that has all the permissions to be able to share screen. So I do apologize. I look like a Oompa Loompa right now. We're certainly not insensitive to that fact that we fully anticipated, you know, this is not an insignificant assumption increase. It's certainly a significant one. And we are certainly, when we were discussing this, we do want to make sure that this assumption update and any assumption updates discussed for the experience study are combined with things like projections to help you understand the long-term impacts of what that means for your plan. We actually even do have the ability to run projections where your experience doesn't match what we assume, to give you an idea of, okay, let's say you didn't update the mortality table. What does that mean, though, for your ongoing cost, to give you an idea of how that can sort of compound over time. The reason that we recommend mortality updates and these kinds of assumption updates is to kind of give structure and a plan for paying for your pension plan. We basically, you know, with our assumptions, we're dictating the timing of when you put money into the plan, but we don't ultimately change what your plan will actually cost you. You know, your plan ultimately will cost you whatever you pay out of the plan in benefit payments and in, administrative expenses, but predominantly it's going to be benefit payments from your plan. And that has to be made up for with asset returns and with contributions. So we try to come up with the most reasonable picture of what that looks like in order to create some stability about when you put those dollars into the plan. And we're willing to discuss, not willing to discuss, we actually want to assist you in creating those plans and how to pay for, these future liabilities that we foresee for your plan. So we can put together projections for you, and we will recommend doing so to help you get an idea of how this can work. And like Lawrence said, we are seeing the trend in going to these Pub 2010 tables, and the more that it's kicked down the road, just the harder it becomes to be able to handle the unexpected increase in your ARC. So,
Is there a fee doing that, those projections?
We do one set of projections as part of your FIP every year. It would depend on how detailed you would want us to get on top of that. We would want direction, I guess, from the board for what specific metrics you would like for us to look at and how detailed the sensitivities would be. And then we'd be happy to provide a quote.
Any other questions, Celine?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Okay, Elizabeth, back to you.
perfect. All right. All right, on this page, we're just showing you the asset reconciliation. We're showing you what actually happened in your trust and then what we do to smooth this out over time. So you can see the red bar is your market value of assets, and then the blue bar is what we call your actuarial value of assets. So your plan experienced a 5% return for the year. You paid out $10.5 million roughly in benefit payments and put in $10 million in employer contributions. An employee put in an extra $2 million. So your total contributions exceeded benefits paid. And then expenses paid out of the plan were $260,000 for a net return of $2.4 million for $44.5 million sitting in your trust at the end of the year. What we do for your pension plan is rather than immediately recognize that investment return, we smooth it out over time. So your investment return is $1 million lower than what we were expecting. So rather than recognizing that all the way, we smooth it out over 5 years so that you gradually see that impact in your assets. And we've been doing this historically for your asset returns. And what this does is it smooths out your actuarial value of assets so you don't see a lot of volatility in your contribution. In general, if on average you get your expected investment return of 7.5%, then in general, your actuarial value of assets is going to average out to what your value would have been. So that's kind of the concept of how this is sort of working. So when we actually compare your liabilities to your assets, we're comparing it to the $45.9 million there that you see in the second line. So we didn't accept all $1 million of that loss this year. $200,000 of it was recognized, and the remaining $800,000 is going to be phased in over the next 4 years. And on this page, we wanted to show you a comparison of what your market value of assets have actually earned, what that translates to on an actuarial basis, and then what you've assumed historically. So back in 2013, the assumed rate of return dropped from 8% down to 7.5%. And we had some good years in there for your market value of assets, and then also some tougher years as well. On average, over a 10-year period, the plan has earned 6.4%. on average on a market value basis. So about 100 basis points lower than what your assumed rate of return is. Given the recommendation to move to the updated mortality table, compounding that with an investment return change would be quite a jump in your recommended contribution. We will certainly be looking at this with the experience study, just in consideration of the fact that, this is already one big move and we're having an experience study coming up. And I couldn't get a hold of Clearbrook to kind of discuss this assumption with them in detail. We haven't provided any sensitivities around that assumption for this year's valuation, but that is something that we will want to discuss with you in detail for your experience study, just because that is trailing what your assumption is, and we want to make sure we're going to use an interest rate that is going to be consistent with what you can reasonably expect your assets to return over the long term. So we are seeing downward pressure on this interest rate assumption. And it is one of what we would say would be two of the main assumptions in measuring your liabilities. Two of the most impactful ones are your mortality and your interest rate. So despite your challenges, you are making the recommended contribution, which is fantastic. That is what is causing your funded status to improve. Back in 2013, it was at quite a low funded percentage down in the teens, and now you're up to about 25% funded even after adopting Pub 2010. So continuing to make those recommended contributions has been very impactful, along with all the plan changes that went into effect. That all helped in helping you improve your funded percentage. We do think that the Pub 2010 tables are the most appropriate now for your population, and we do recommend those projections that we were discussing with you previously. And we do just want to give you the heads up that we are going to be looking pretty intensely at your interest rate assumption for your experience study this year. All right, and that's all that we had to present on the pension side. If nobody has questions, I'll pass it on to our OPEB team. So does anybody have any follow-up questions before I pass it on to them?
Hold on 1 second, please.
Sure.
Okay, I'm all set. Thank you.
Perfect.
So, Al, just as a point of discussion, and not as a, I think we ought to give a phone call to the state of Rhode Island's MERS pension system and see if they are adopting these 2010 tables. And if they are, or are not, ask them, what's their rationale? What are you, if you're adopting it, why? If you're not adopting it, why?
Okay, I'm making a note of that right now to call Mr. Magazine. Okay, I got it.
I just had one question, just on the Pub 2010. Geographically, is that study based on the entire United States, or is it broken down by region? And if it's not broken down by region, do you have any indication as to where, New England or the Northeast would typically fall compared to the rest of the country?
A great question, Jim. They actually did look at the data. First of all, the data comes from all across the country. It came primarily, I believe, from large statewide retirement systems with pretty broad dispersion. They thought when they were constructing the tables that they might produce regional tables, but when they actually looked at the statistical data, they determined that it had far less influence than things like classification, which is why they ended up doing a teacher's table and a public safety table and a general table. So the short answer is no, there are not regional specific tables. My gut is that the Northeast would be maybe slightly above average. I think that the West Coast in general has the lowest rate of mortality and the South has higher. Midwest and Northeast are more middle of the pack, but that varies considerably depending on the group you're looking at, education level, metro area. And I don't think that the society was seeing anything to suggest that they could make those adjustments reasonably well. But it's a very astute question. Does that answer what you were going for?
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
All right. All right.
I will say before we turn it over to our OPEB guys, Carter was being a little modest earlier when he said he was taking over new responsibilities. Carter was named our new CEO a couple of months ago. So in case you all didn't know that, congratulations to Carter.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks, Lawrence. All right.
Matt or Emily?
I guess ready for some OPEB information. Good evening, everyone. This is Matt Sherritts from Nyhart. I'm an actuary and that works on the town's OPEB valuation every year. And Emily Klaus is also a credentialed actuary who has been helping me out with the town's OPEB valuation this year. So she is on the call and will be speaking to you all as well. I actually have a history with the town of West Warwick, feelings of nostalgia here this evening. Used to work on the pension plan with Elizabeth and Tate Odom during those fun times of the back in 2012, the Rhode Island Retirement Security Act, working through all those benefit changes and the funding improvement plan. So definitely for the last couple of years, I've been working on the health side and look forward to continuing to work with you going forward. I don't think regularly that we meet with the pension board about the OPEB plan. I believe maybe once every 2 years. But essentially, we provide an accounting valuation report under standards GASB 74 and 75. And every other year, once every 2 years, we put together what we call a full valuation where we collect census data and take a look at all the assumptions and really update based on the active employee population and retiree health coverage that has been elected, update that once every 2 years. And then every other year in between, we do an interim valuation where we essentially use the census data from the prior year and roll it forward to the current year and just make some adjustments based on what did health costs actually, how much did it change by compared to what we assumed. So the town offers various benefits depending on what group you're in and what union. On the OPEB side, the main component of the benefit is the medical and drug health coverage. Several plans are offered, as well as a dental benefit. And the subsidies vary by group, not only in amount, but for duration. For example, fire and police are subsidized for life, whereas other groups receive a subsidy until Medicare eligibility. So okay, you're already on the next slide. Thank you. So the numbers that we're going to show in this report. Also, I guess I missed my opportunity to say I apologize for not being on video. I was having some technical difficulties. So my purple screen is actually black. So my apologies for that.
Comment? Can I ask a question before we go further?
Absolutely.
On the page before, it says comments on projections. It talks about census data there. If we don't get
Correct.
census this year, that's probably not going to happen. Is that going to make a big effect on it, or you really can't tell?
So it's hard to say. It's most public plans that we work with opt to do the required full valuation once every 2 years. But depending on how the actual experience matches up with what we assume in terms of how many people elect retirement health coverage when they do retire, or how many people quit versus what we assumed. Those could definitely impact the liability. So yeah, there's really no way to know unless that's been monitored in-house. But yes, we often do see, liability fluctuations due to updating the census once every 2 years, but in both directions.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another comment on that slide is these are estimates. I do not anticipate the numbers to change very much when we finalize the report this year, and we are nearing the stages of finalizing the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020 GASB 7475 report. And so on the slide that's up there now, we wanted to talk to you about a couple different changes this year. As we were talking to the pension team about the mortality tables that they were recommending, these are the same tables that we've been recommending to clients and have been transitioning our clients to these Pub 2010 tables for about a year now, as the tables were published about 18 months ago, I believe. And as Beth and Lawrence provided you much detail about that study, I think they took a load off of my plate, so I won't go too much deeper, but we're essentially recommending the same changes to the mortality assumption. I didn't mention up above the healthcare trend rate. So one assumption that we make when we calculate the liabilities for OPEB is medical inflation. What are health premiums going to increase by in the future, and claims costs. The adjustments we make in an interim year are we look at actual premium changes from last year to this year, because we can collect that information pretty easily compared to collecting census information. And from July 1, 19 to July 1, 2020, premiums did not increase as much as we thought they would. So it was a good year from a health cost standpoint for the town. And so by making that adjustment, the liability dropped by 5% compared to what we expected it to be a year ago. The mortality, by updating the mortality, we've already estimated that it only increases the liability by about 1%. So it has less of an impact than on the pension side. And the main reason for that is because most of the subsidies are given to retirees on a temporary basis to age up until Medicare age. So a lot of the lifetime benefits, most of the liability is not for life. Whereas, those mortality tables definitely impact, the calculations if they were receiving those benefits for life, such as the pension benefit. So really going to this new table, all these new tables will not impact the OPEB side nearly as much. The other assumption that the pension team, Elizabeth and Lawrence, mentioned going forward as part of their experience study was the change to the discount rate. We actually received the long-term expected return from the investment advisor of the OPEB trust, which is it's managed by a different group than the pension side, and they specifically mentioned that they're expecting a 5% return net of inflation. So if you add inflation to that, what we see typically is in the 1.5% to 2% inflation range. So that would come out to a total return of 6.5% to 7%. Currently, the most recent valuation was using a 7.5% discount rate, which was something we discussed last year. That going forward, we're really going to need to take a look at this because we think it's on the higher end of what we see and what a little bit higher than what the asset advisors are telling us is what they expect. So our recommendation would be to decrease that to 7%, which is more in line with what the advisors are recommending. And if we do decrease the discount rate to 7%, that the liability would then increase by about 5%. So if you look at all those changes, it pretty much sums up to zero. Since you get the 5% decrease from actual premium changes, and then the discount rate drop pretty much offsets that, and you just have a very small mortality liability increase. So you can go to the next slide, Beth, please.
Sure.
Thank you. So here, now we're actually getting into the liability figures. All the way to the left there, that is based on the last year's valuation rolled forward to this year. Would have been our best guess at what the liability, the net OPEB liability, which is synonymous to the unfunded liability, because you do have some assets that in a trust set aside for OPEB. So this is essentially the portion of the liability that is unfunded that we're showing. So we expected the liability to come in at $58.5 million. And then it shows you incrementally the impact of each change. So by making the adjustment for actual premium changes, decrease that net OPEB liability to $55.3 million. So not insignificant. And then you can see as we move to the right, the PUB 2010 mortality update just bumped it up a little bit to $55.9 million. And then the discount rate certainly had more of an impact than the mortality table, bringing it to $58.7 million. And the table below, the top row shows the incremental impact of each individual change. And then the bottom table shows you the cumulative impact. So you can see there at the bottom right that cumulatively, the impact of all these changes is an increase in the net OPEB liability of $247,000, which compared to $58 million is really not a large amount. One thing, and Emily, I'll let you go ahead and speak on this, but about the discount rate that we use and the funding policy that we assume that determines that. If you want to speak to that.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Just wanted to, I guess this is all based on the current funding policy, and as we show in our valuation report, is that the ADC will be, or the actuarially determined contribution, which is kind of synonymous to the ARC that the pension group was referring to earlier, would be funded going into the future. And so right now we're using that full 7.5% to estimate your liabilities. We did do some internal testing just to see, if you all were kind of putting in something less than that ADC,
each year, how would that impact the rate that we would be allowed to use for accounting purposes? Because basically what GASB 7475 says is that if you are unable to, your trust is unable to sustain the benefit payments long term, we are required to use what they call a blended discount rate for accounting purposes, where we would blend that 7.5% or 7% with something much lower that's based on 20-year municipal bonds. And so if the town ever were to kind of have a funding policy in place where those amounts were lower than that ADC that we're typically kind of assuming going forward, that discount rate might drop for accounting purposes and would increase the liability significantly. So we just wanted to bring that up just as a talking point to say that these projections are based on the town continuing to try to fund those benefits for retirees, as well as the recommended pre-funding contributions that we provide on an annual basis.
Thank you, Emily. And yeah, we actually looked historically the last few years at the contributions that the town has actually made to the trust. And on average, over the last 4 or 5 years, I believe the contribution that has been made is around 85% of the ADC or the ARC, if you will. And however, last year, for fiscal year ending 2020, the town contributed about 96% of the ARC, or the ADC. So definitely not far off from the assumption that we're using. If you know, it appears that there's a discretionary contribution. It's not necessarily tied to the ADC, but in the past we have been notified that the town's intent is to fund the ADC. So that is what we've been using in our projections, which has allowed us to use a higher discount rate. But it's definitely something that we really ask of the town, you know, the overseers of the OPEB plan. What is your anticipation of in terms of funding the OPEB benefits going forward? So we want to make sure that our assumption of that you will fund the full ARC is accurate. On this, we can go ahead and move to the next page, or Elizabeth. Thank you. Here we're showing the liabilities broken out by division. The same types of groups that comprises the pension plan. Lots of numbers thrown at you here. All the way to the left, that first column of numbers, that is the expected liability if none of these adjustments are made, and on for each group totaling to $62.3 million. So this is the total OPEB liability, or in the pension world, you could think of it as the accrued liability. So it does not factor in assets at all. You could think of it as a gross liability. The next column over is after we make these adjustments, so it totals $62.5 million. Again, not much change here by making these adjustments. We also show that here's where we show the assets in the trust, and it's split out by group, but they're out of the $62.5 million liability, there are $3.8 million in investments and assets that in the trust that are held for paying out benefits in the future. The net OPEB liability, if we move one column over, has been the difference between the total OPEB liability and the assets, which is the same type of number that we've shown on the previous slides. So $58.7 million based on all these adjustments. The far right column just shows you the liability impact of making the changes by group. You'll see that, there's some variation in there. At first glance, the department head increase of 8.3% sort of sticks out. But that's such a small piece of the liability in a small group that just a small dollar amount could be a large percentage. So I wouldn't give that too much attention. Here, the school non-certified group, you'll see that their liability actually went down 3.2% as a result of the changes. And I think this illustrates that the impact of the duration that the subsidy is provided, because for this group, they receive subsidies until Medicare eligibility. So mortality is not having much of an impact at all for them. So that's why their liability did not grow. But again, 0.4% is the total increase of the liabilities. So it's not terrible news that we're giving. Usually when we recommend lowering the discount rate and updating to a mortality table that has longer expected lives, definitely not great news. But for the health, the OPEB valuation, we don't, because of premiums and not increasing too much over the last year, we actually have some pretty neutral news. So it might actually be a good year to implement these changes, because it won't upset the financials too much. And I think we can go to the next slide. Unless, Emily, did you have anything to add to that previous slide?
Nope, I think you hit the main points. The other reasons you might see some variation there between the different groups would also be the health plans that they're electing. So we definitely, when we're making those trend adjustments, are looking at the plans that each person has selected. And so you might see some variation depending on the plans offered and what folks have elected. So that was just one other comment I wanted to make, but definitely you can proceed with the ADC differences here.
That's a great comment. And actually, to that point, the school plans, except for two of the plans offered, the premiums increased by 4.2% from 2019 to 2020. And the town plans, the premiums increased, the pre-65 plans increased by 1.6%. And we were assuming that they were going to increase by 8%. So that just illustrates how we came to a lower liability than we anticipated. And on this slide, we're showing the recommended contribution for the prior fiscal year ending 2020 versus the one that we're currently in. On the far left, the 5.45 million, that was the contribution we recommended when we provided the full valuation last year. And the two columns on the right, or the bars, are the recommended contributions that we'll be providing, the estimated contributions we'll be providing this year for the current fiscal year. And the red bar would be if we implemented the mortality update, but we kept the discount rate at 7.5%, the recommended contribution would be 5.36 million. And the gray bar shows the recommended contribution if we lower that to 7%. So it would jump up about $141,000 to 5.5 million. But a very similar number to the prior year.
Hi, this is Helene Tay. You said,
hi, Helene.
Hi. You said that you had looked at what the town had put provided to this ADC recommendation over the last 4 years, and you thought it would be somewhere around 85%, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you look at what was actually provided or what was budgeted?
Those are actual contributions.
You looked at what was actually provided. I'm looking at the report that they provide to the state on June 30th, 2020. It's this called the State Transparency Report. And they budgeted,
Okay.
yep. And for OPEB, they budgeted $3.225 million, and they actually put in $2.569 million, which is less than half of what you had recommended. Okay.
Yeah, I will say it can be a little confusing. That contribution actually includes, so the way the trust is set up is that benefit payments are paid from the general fund. So the trust, benefit payments are not made from the trust. Contributions go into the trust. So included in a contribution to the OPEB, we include both cash contributed to the trust, like a pension contribution, but also give credit to those funds that were used to pay for benefits, the pay-go costs, the premium subsidies. So the ADC actually includes the pay-go cost as well, which for 2020, fiscal year ending 2020, it was $3.7 million was the total cash spend on health benefits, retiree health benefits. So that the 5.45 million that what was actually contributed for fiscal year ending 2020 that we're giving credit to the town for is $5.2 million compared to our recommended 5.45, and that includes 3.7 plus 1.5 that was contributed to the trust.
Okay, thank you very much. That information actually is not provided to the state. That 1.5. I'm just looking at the state. What was actually provided to the state. So that information, that 1.5 million, was not provided. But you know, they only provide to the state what the state asks for. So.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. Who I guess blesses the budget in terms of funding OPEB for the town? Is there a special board for that?
The town council comes up with the budget, but the whole town gets to vote on the budget. So we don't have a line item veto as a town, as a town citizen. We have to like pass the whole budget or not pass the whole budget. And
okay.
I think the answer to his question is the council comes up with a dollar amount through subcommittee or whatever, and that's put in with the budget.
Right.
I see. Yeah, well, I mean, if it would be helpful, we would be more than happy when we deliver our annual results each year to speak at a town council meeting. If if they're the ones that are recommending a certain contribution amount each year, just want to offer that to you.
Okay.
But I think that is all we had prepared for you, Emily. Is there anything else that we left off?
Nope. I think that's it.
All right. Does anyone have any questions on the OPEB side?
No, the only thing that you said, I think that would be a good idea when they're starting to work on the budget, putting it together. for the following year, that would be a good thing to do so that they'll sit there and explain to them and then answer any questions so they continue to help them in making a little bit better decisions sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Do you have an idea of when that budgeting meeting takes place? What time of the year?
They usually start in April and try to finish up by the end of May.
Okay. Is there someone I should contact, or should I just communicate through the town? And they can, I think Kristen is our primary contact. Just communicate through her.
She'd be the best person, sure, Kristen. Yeah.
Kristen would be, yep. He could tell you
Okay.
what, then you can go from there.
Okay.
That's very helpful. We will do that.
Okay.
I'm glad to see everyone is still awake after all that actuarial discussion.
Yep.
Somehow.
Okay, let's see. Does anyone have any questions for them? Any board members? No further comment or discussion. I want to thank everyone for your presentation and spending your time with us at our meeting.
Thank you for having us, Mr. Chair. It's good to meet everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Yep. Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Hope, thanks, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, have a good evening, Drew. Mr. Chair, while we have you, it sounds like the OPEB impact is not going to be very substantial, so they doesn't sound like it might create waves for them to go ahead and update assumptions. Would you like us to prepare preliminary numbers in draft form for your next meeting with or without the updated mortality table? I think we would like some direction before we log off tonight, if you guys are willing to give us some.
I would say yes. Is it possible to do it with each table so we could see the difference?
Yeah, there's probably going to be a charge for that. I mean,
Is there?
do we know what the charge is? I mean, are these the people that we have to pay to come in here, 3 or 4 of them, to present information to us each year?
Is this estimate that you do part of what you normally do, or is that going to be something extra?
Well, the VAL results, if you will, and the meeting, if you will, that's a normal part of the valuation services or process, if you will. You know, I think really on both the valuation and OPEB side, and to do one valuation, if you will, is very normal. If we start using different mortality tables, that's and we start providing some sensitivity and analysis and value and commentary around it. I mean, that generally is I'll say out of the scope of our normal services. Now we usually just bill on a time and material type basis for something like that. You know, it's not a huge undertaking by any stretch of the imagination. It's not like a plan design, if you will, but at the same time, it's additional time and work for us to create the new valuation, to put it together, to present it, to comment on it, and to meet, if you will. So yes, there would be additional charges for that. To provide you with further information, we'd have to just get a little bit more sense as to how much from a fee perspective. just like I said, just depends sort of how much and whatnot. I think it's, it'd be, I don't know. Just better if we knew exactly what you wanted us to do. If you wanted us to look at just the full scale of implementing the new mortality, for instance, sort of side by side, because the normal projection, that is really more or less sort of something we do every year, but to add a second projection onto it, again, that would be additional. Again, how much just depends on if that's really the only thing you want.
All right, I guess at this point, then we'll just go with the normal projection and we'll see what that comes up with and go from there.
So using the current mortality assumption, Mr. Chair, or
Yes.
using the new, okay, the current mortality, okay.
Right now, based on everything you're saying today, it seems like we should change the mortality tables, but until we connect, bring it up as an agenda at a meeting and vote on it, I would say you have to use the table we're using now.
We will proceed as such. Does that get you what you need, Beth?
It does. When do you next meet? Do you know when you next meet as a board, I guess? I know with coronavirus, everybody's schedules have really been thrown. So I don't know how regularly you're meeting.
We're doing monthly meetings as long as we have a quorum. And we're going to be losing one member but this is going to be her last meeting. But we picked up one new member, so we still should be able to have a quorum for next month.
Okay. I just asked, it says state, and also I know that your auditors may be asking for those GASB reports, and we keep those assumptions consistent with what you opt for the final valuation. So I asked only to make sure that we're going to meet the timing for both those needs for you. We can get the projection out to you here soon, but timing-wise, I want to make sure that, I guess, before the end specifically. So.
Okay, that sounds all right. Elizabeth?
Yes.
I just want to let you know that your purple virus has spread to Lawrence's green also.
Oh, at least we bring a little bit of joy to our actuarial presentations.
That's ridiculous. Oh man. Just call me Violet Beauregard from here on out.
Thank you again for having us, everyone. It's very nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Very nice to meet you.
Good night.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Lovely
Stay healthy.
everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. We have skipped item E, which we'll go back to now. Item E is payment of bills. The first one is Olin and Penza. Item 1A is monthly legal service of the Pension Board Council, MBF 7372, the general file for September. Amount billed is $748. Hours billed is 4.10.
I'd like to make a motion that we pay this bill.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made.
I second the motion.
Motion made and seconded. Pay monthly legal service for Olin and Penza in the amount of $740 for the month of September 2020. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E2, Nyhart Company. 2A, invoice 0161311, actuary service for July of 2020. Calculations, LaValle and Hopkins. The hours was 5.0. The amount is $930. Second one, B, invoice number 0160901, actuary service for June 2020. Total listings from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. Hours is 12.5. The amount is $2,940. Item 2C, invoice number 001573222, actuary service from January 2020. Calculations. Lanterman, Masachi, and Jenks. Hours is 8.8. The amount is $1,740. Invoice D, sorry, item 2D, invoice 0162802, actuary service of September 2020. Funding valuation preparation, 28.9 hours, $6,530. Invoice number 0162801, actuary service for September 2020. Calculations for Del Petray, Willa, Briscoe, and Souza. The amount is 4.8 hours, and the amount is 1,100. One of these bills we had tabled from last month. I did call and talk to Elizabeth, and that was in regard to questioning for the consultations, doing a consult. And what they do is, it's not hiring somebody and bringing it in, that she told me. It's, they just consult looking at other tables and figures and stuff, just to make sure that what they're doing is basically in consensus and in alignment with the standards that they have to do. So there's no actually hiring of a company or anything for that. So that answer.
Okay.
We have a few bills here that have been tabled because of meetings that we didn't have a quorum, and a couple that we had questions on. But they are basically been all set, so now it's just a matter of trying to play catch up there.
Yeah. Mm. Again, you said things like that this consultant is just someone that they consult to verify that they're using the correct information or correct tables?
No, they just do them. They consult different tables and different items and different things to make sure what they're doing is, I understood it, is to meet the standards, make sure they're doing things correctly.
Okay.
It's not actually hiring a consultant. It's just time to consult and make sure that that is correct. That's how I understood her to explain it.
Well,
Not an actual going.
it certainly doesn't make any sense based on how they've described all of the hours spent. You know, they've described these hours spent by people, an analyst, an actuary. So,
yeah, I think, Helene, part of the thing that gets a little confusing, we did at one time back ask them to itemize their bill better, because we would get calls, but we weren't sure what they're for. So we scale it now, so they give us the amount of hours, and if they can put it down to what each of it was, they're doing that. So, as far as that consultant, well, it looks like they went out, outside and hired somebody that did it. They're just showing how they spent some of that time.
Okay. I got it. All right, so
They're
anyway,
just gonna
I'd like-
wait to, the bill, in my opinion. It's ridiculous.
well, you do understand their hourly rate is very high. It's over $200 an hour for most of these things.
Exactly, and they just look for creative ways to create an invoice for the average person not to understand it. So what are people doing? Just paying it, and they're just gonna have their fees or whatever, just like how we pay for those other people to come in town every year. There's no need for us to pay for them to come in town. It's ridiculous. And I thought we were supposed to go over all this stuff and try to get into MERS and all that stuff. But now it's been, 10 months? And we haven't discussed any of that.
We did talk about going out to bid, but we've never been able to sit down and actually draw up specs and do that. We've had some meetings, we didn't have enough people. We haven't had an executive board meeting. I can't remember when the last one we had. Yeah, there's been some of these questions that you're bringing up and what's been brought up before is basically identical. But until we can get some bids and see where we stand with anything else outside compared to what we're doing right now, we have to deal with this for now. Over the individual bills,
So I'd like to make a motion that we authorize payment of these bills for Nyhart under item E2.
I'll second it.
I second the motion.
motion made and seconded. Item E2, Nyhart, to pay invoices under A, B, C, D, and E. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
And if I could ask, with respect to just the billing generally by Nyhart and the hourly rate and what they are, do you know if that's something we could connect with the treasurer's office on, just to see if it's consistent with, what they see from other municipalities, or, maybe similar, what they pay for similar services, on the MERS level or something like that. It may be better, it'd probably be better to know in terms of cost, where we fall in relation to other municipalities, rather than just looking at the rates or the hourly rate or the time spent in the abstract. But I would think that that's something the treasurer's office would be able to help out with.
State treasurer, sir?
Yes.
It wouldn't hurt to do that, no.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't mind reaching out myself, on behalf of the board, if that's okay with everybody else.
It's okay with me. It sounds like a good idea. At least we get an idea where we stand based on what we got. Anyone else? Thank you very much, sir. Go ahead and do that. We'll see what we can come up with.
Sounds good.
Any other discussion? Okay. Item G, discussion action regarding approval of monthly pension calculations. First one is Aaron Burley, normal pension fire. The amount is pending and his date is pending. We don't have those figures yet. Is that correct, Tracy?
Correct.
Okay. Item 2 is Stephen Harder, occupational disability fire. We still do not have the figures from Nyhart. So we're just gonna have to wait until next month. We do
I'd like
have,
to make a motion that we table item G until next month then.
we do have item 2, Stephen Hart. We're looking to do an executive board meeting next Wednesday, just for this one individual to discuss. There is a few things pending that we've had to contact our lawyer on, and some questions have been drawn up in that. I have spoken with the fire union and our lawyer, and back and forth with Tracy and that. It's that kind of longer than it should. We've had some problems with HR and that in the town, but I think we've got most of it straightened out, but we need to meet as a board and just go over a few things and make a decision, make a vote. I can't do some things legally. I can't say one thing one way or another. We do it as a board. I've been trying to do some research in that, but it gets a little hairy because we're bouncing from different pieces of information to work with. So that's why I sat down and talked with our lawyer and said that we decided we need to do an executive board to hopefully straighten this out, because this individual has been terminated and there's not been any money coming in, and I don't want to push it off anymore. It's just a matter of we just got to go over a few things, and I think we can tidy this up, get an answer done by doing executive board meeting.
So, Al, do we have, this is an occupational disability. Do we have the reports from 3 doctors on this?
No, and that's some of the things that we got to discuss, then we can't really go into that now.
Okay. So,
If we can get everything and come to a consensus and make a decision and vote on one way or the other, then we can do another thing that we're doing tonight. The only thing on the agenda basically would be this individual, and at that point we do what we've done before, approve the disability pending on the figures coming from and him agreeing with it. And if he agrees, once they come in, if he agrees on it and signs off, then he gets it and doesn't have to wait. We can, like I say, we can basically tie it up in 2 meetings and we can get it done.
we can if we have the results of his 3 independent medical examinations.
Again, we can't talk about that tonight, but we
Okay.
can, one of the things we're going to cover in our executive board.
Okay.
So table these for now. Do we have a motion for that?
Al,
Yes.
wait a minute, Al.
Go ahead.
Beth was supposed to stay on the call, remember? She has questions and concerns,
Yeah,
something to do with the COLA.
When she went off, I realized that. So what I'm going to do is I've got a burn tomorrow, so I won't be able. I won't have an electronics on me. I won't be able to call. Can you send her an email?
Well, I'm going to send her an email and get it
Put those
on what the concerns are.
Yeah, put those questions down on paper, and if you and I can't answer the questions she's got, then I will call her and see if I can get a better understanding of what they're looking for, and then we'll go from there. I'm not sure what her questions are. I don't think it's going to be an issue, but again, without knowing what they are, I know his situation is unique, but it shouldn't be that hard to do that. I think it's just a matter of how they're interpreting the CBA, the plan, and so forth. So I think she's more looking for guidance of what to do, similar to when we have the people that are on workman's comp and the amount of in-service time. I'm hoping it's along that line, but we won't know until we find out what she's asking for. So if you could do that, and see if you can give us those questions on an email, and then we can go from there.
I will.
Thank you. Hold on a second. Okay. One question for the audience. Next item is H, public comment.
No, you got to table, Al, you have to have a motion to table Darren and Steve Potter.
Do we have a motion to table item 1 and 2?
G1 and 2. We just need a second.
I second the motion.
Motion made and seconded. to table item G 1 and 2. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item, if I can pick, item, us left. H is public comment. I see nobody in the public here. We have one, Russ. Tracy? Tracy,
Yes.
can you just, do like you do normally do, send to Russ and, Norman, what we got from, Rockland,
Well,
like you normally do?
yeah, when I get the correct clear book, I'll send them clear book in Rockland.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no public comment, I'm up for adjournment. Unless anybody's got anything else they want to put question on. Anything.
I have one question. I think had appropriated some money to do that Seth Magazine wanted us to do to see if we could be eligible for getting into the MERS system. Do you know if that ever happened?
No, I don't.
It was like $25,000 or something, and they had agreed to it, but
Remember?
I haven't heard any results from that at all.
No, I remember the council president talking about one meeting, but I've never heard any more since then.
Yeah.
I know he had asked, and I didn't think at that time that when he asked that there was nothing had got back yet, so I don't know. Excuse me, that's a good question though.
Well, yeah, I mean, my real concern is political. If right now we've got people who are willing to work with us at the state,
Right.
and but another election, that all may change. So we need to strike while the iron is hot.
Yes, I understand that. I'll see if we can follow up on that. I've got to call him anyway, so I'm going to do both at the same time. Before we go, Helene, I want to thank you for your time and your service. We're going to miss you. But you do what you got to do. But thank you again for everything that you've done.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye, guys. I'll miss you guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned at
Thank you.
21:30. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, Joe. Joe, wake up.
Aye.
I'm here, Al. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay.
And Tracy, if you're still there, I need you to forward me Jim's email address to add to this board so he gets the invites in the future.
I will, and I'll have to take Helene off.
Yep. All right.
Okay, I'll do that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Good night.
Joe. Joe?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Johnson.